All right, let's close the loop. Let's just talk for a few minutes before we get to the Bernie stuff, because this kind of contextualizes it. Immanuel Wallerstein died a couple of weeks ago, and he was a sociologist, political theorist. He generated something called world systems theory. Wallerstein was very influential. He wrote the book Modern World Systems Theory. There's a great piece written by Nicole Aschoff in The Jacobin called The Brilliant Immanuel Wallerstein was an anti-capitalist to the end, and he was the sort of forerunner in writing about the specifics of how center and peripheral economics works. This is a clip from, can you scroll down? I want to definitely cite the name of this channel. It's called Then and Now. Then and Now. And we'll just play just a short bit of it of him, and go check out this channel because I think this is another independent channel. Then and Now, him talking about world systems theory, giving you a kind of some contextualization.
Second structuralist school of thought was world systems theory. World systems theory, developed by the American sociologist Immanuel Wallerstein, builds upon, but also fundamentally differs from, dependency theory. In world systems theory, any analysis of world history and economic development should be studied from the position of the total world system, not through individual states or isolated events. This is because it's the very nature of the world system that creates inequality. For Wallerstein, there are still core and periphery countries, but there are also semi-periphery countries, which represent developing periphery countries and declining core countries. In his analysis, Wallerstein sees history in cycles through which a hegemonic core emerges, like the US or previously Britain and before that the Netherlands, which then for a period dominates the capitalist system. For Wallerstein, though, it's not necessarily rich countries that exploit poorer ones, but capitalists exploiting workers in core and periphery countries. For both dependency theorists...
So this is really brilliant, and this was what, dependency theory focused on the relationship between East and West, North and South, which obviously is overlap in this, but Wallerstein centered historical phases of empire and then the vital relationship between exploited and exploiters across the globe. In other words, it was capital relationships, and different empires exemplified different phases of how capital worked. Immanuel Wallerstein wrote, "World systems analysis is not a theory, but a protest is not. World systems analysis is not a theory, but a protest against neglected issues and deceptive epistemologies. It's a call for social change, indeed for unthinking the premise of 19th century social science. It is an intellectual task that has to be a political task as well, because the search for the true and the search for the good is but a single quest." Wallerstein came from a politically conscious family and had been involved in activism back in New York City, but his research in Ghana and the Ivory Coast changed the way he saw the world. He credited African studies with, quote, "opening my eyes to the burning political issues of the contemporary world and to the scholarly questions of how to analyze the history of the modern world system. It was Africa that was responsible for challenging the more stultifying parts of my education." But that's really a great distinction. You see it even in the Haiti case. Like, there's the obvious domineering relationship between the United States and Haiti, but to just leave it as the asymmetry in power, you got to get specific. What is the capital class in the United States that benefits from exploiting Haiti? What are the capital brokers within the Haitian system that benefit from those parasitic relationships? This really is, not to keep winding it back to this, but this really is why I have such an allergy to the Elizabeth Warren economic patriotism stuff, because I do see things as fundamentally interdependent. And I do not want a system that might slightly be nicer to American workers, but still rests and is predicated on these systems of just grotesque iniquities. And Wallerstein identified and fought against that for his career.
And, just to piggyback off of that, Wallerstein was very influenced by Lenin specifically, and Lenin's theory of imperialism, which folks should really spend some time and familiarize themselves with, because it's very prescient. And one thing that Lenin wrote a lot about was in Indian imperialism, how they used the local population to like the British used the local population in the army to oppress the Indian people, and that created a separation between the working class in India. And it starts to hit at what we're talking about here when we're talking about world theory system, is that there is one class that is international. So we talk a lot about rich and poor countries, but I think a more important point to make is that there really aren't rich and poor countries. There are rich people in these poor countries, and those people are hyper exploiting those people, and rich people in the United States are hyper exploiting those folks. And it's not to not be able to recognize, for example, living in the United States in the seat of empire, that we have access to great wealth and aren't in the same kind of material deprivation as other people. But then you look at the working class of the United States, you look at people in Appalachia who really are living in third world conditions in a lot of areas, right? You start to recognize that these global systems of inequity and exploitation have a lot more in common than nationalism. And just to get back to Lenin, this was really important. For example, in World War I, people talk about World War I as a war of nationalism. But Lenin's point was so important, is that he said, no, nationalism is just the outpouring of the economic relations between the imperial powers, which are trying to secure as much access to colonies abroad and to markets as possible. And this is a reshuffling of the imperial order, right? So it's like having that second level understanding of the imperial structure, which allows you to recognize that the system fundamentally is about capitalism, rather than these kind of distractions which are secondary. Not that they're not important, but that they're recognizing where they come from is such an important thing if you're trying to build any kind of anti-imperialist politics.
100%. And also read People's History to the Third World by Vijay Prashad, and he'll talk about why third worldism failed as a fusion of all of the CIA and capital domination and Cold War dichotomies that we talk about, but also because some of these projects are fundamentally like, yes, nationalism obviously is better than colonialism or imperialism. However, one, if you don't have an economic or systems change, you replicate other forms of hierarchies in a society. And then, again, you just replicate global capital relationships, basically. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.